Hello, welcome everyone to Mentoring Up. Thanks for joining us today during your lunch hour. Feel free to have your cameras off and eat as you need. And thanks for taking some time with us to learn about Mentoring Up today. I am Elizabeth Sturdy. I'm the Director of Mentoring and Academic Success Initiatives for Graduate Studies. My role is fairly new. It just started about 5 years ago. And I'm really tasked with creating new resources and programs to support mentorship, particularly for grad students and postdoctoral scholars, especially with their faculty mentors. So I run a faculty mentor training program called the Graduate Mentoring Initiative, where we train faculty on mentoring grad students and postdocs. But we also have this Mentoring Up program, which is a counterpart to that of how mentees, so grad students and postdocs, how they can really set their relationships up for success with faculty mentors. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is a program that we've offered as a whole 6-session program, but today is just the first session that we're offering on Zoom. We've been trying to reach more folks and break those up and just make it something that you can do a little bit more accessibly. So today is just the first session. It's a general overview of sort of mentorship now and what your role is as a mentee and some of these fundamental ideas about mentoring up, which we're going to talk about. So let's get started. I wanted to start with just a reflection activity of thinking about a current or previous research mentoring relationship and some of the things that you've found most beneficial so far. So just qualities or behaviors or support items, advice, anything that's been helpful in mentorship so far from a relationship that you've had, please add it to the chat. I would love to see all the benefits you've received thus far and for us to really reflect on how important and critical mentorship is for your success. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Please flood that chat with some of the benefits you've seen. All right, I'm starting to see some. Thank you so much. So open communication. Yes, communication is so critical to a good relationship, any relationship, right? But especially mentoring relationships. One of our sessions is on communication that we do for this program, since it is so critical. Clear expectations, yeah. That's another session we do on aligning expectations of mainly making sure that both parties are discussing their expectations. You as mentees have expectations too, so trying to kind of clarify what yours are and what your mentors are and trying to align is really important. Would anyone else like to share some other benefits or what's been beneficial so far? All right, well, feel free to keep adding as you're thinking. We're going to move along. And like I said, do some overview on mentorship first, just to get some context. A lot has changed and there's some resources on campus I want you to be aware of before we talk about mentoring up specifically. So Graduate Council has mentoring guidelines, and these are important expectations of faculty mentors and mentees on this campus. It's primarily focused on graduate students, but I think can be a good resource for postdocs as well. And they define mentoring for us. So they talk about mentoring as this close relationship between a grad student and a faculty member who's providing guidance, support, and research advice in an individualized manner. So I really want to emphasize that, and that's part of the new trends in mentoring, is really changing and adapting the style based on your mentee. And that every mentee is different and needs different support. And so it's not really a one style fits all anymore. And that there needs to be inclusive approaches that really acknowledge and affirm different backgrounds and identities and provide holistic support. So we're going to talk about this too. There's more in mentorship besides the sort of the research support, but also sort of supporting your well-being and also your professional growth. and things that are going on sort of inside and outside the university. So it's a very kind of holistic definition. There are a lot of components to mentorship, and it's very much defined in this document, which we're going to share in the chat so you can have a copy of sort of all that is incorporated and expected of mentorship on this campus. And mentorship, like I said, has definitely evolved, and there's different understandings of it. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to explain this, particularly because we are seeing the big culture shifts and trying to change the culture in mentorship. And the way your faculty mentors were receiving mentorship is probably very different from the current culture. So just sort of understanding this evolution in mentorship can be helpful. So in the past, it was really seen as sort of something that someone did out of generosity, if they were sort of open to the idea of mentoring others. It was very top down, sort of this approach of making the mentee just like the mentor. So sort of, you will become a faculty member just like me and do research just like me, sort of that approach. And sort of using that one style approach of not really understanding the unique needs of the mentee, but really focusing on just sort of the mentor style and making the mentee like the mentor. And that this is sort of just something that benefits people when they're starting out. That's really just a one-on-one type structure, so not a lot of diversity in structures and approaches, and that it was a skill that someone kind of either had the intuition or not to do. And what we see now is that this is a responsibility. So those guidelines for campus are explicitly outlining what's expected of a faculty member, for example, in their mentoring. We saw that there's a lot of different skills. We talked about communication and expectations that come into mentorship. It's very much a leadership role. There are a lot of things to develop in terms of skills and working with other people and building relationships and how to guide and advise others. So these are skills that we can teach, which is why we have programs and resources and workshops about these skills. And it's reciprocal. There are benefits on both sides, and there are expectations and roles for both parties. So not just this top-down approach. And as I mentioned, the goal is not to make the mentee just like the mentor now. It's much more individualized. What are the mentee's goals? How do we help a mentee be successful? What does the mentee need? And then we're going to talk about how we need multiple mentors in a variety of structures. All of us do throughout all of our careers. So this isn't something that you just sort of need while you're in grad school or a postdoc, but this is something that I need, that my boss needs, my boss's boss needs, to continue to grow and develop in our professional roles. So I wanted to share some of the benefits of mentorship to you, just to really underscore how important it is to have positive mentoring relationships. So this is something that's really critical to your success. They found that you're more productive and satisfied, you feel more confident. It's really helpful for your well-being. There's less anxiety and depression when you have a positive mentoring relationship. You do more persistent academically, learn more. We see even greater diversity from those that have positive mentoring relationships, and more publications as well. So really important for your success, both your personal well-being and your academic success on campus, to have positive relationships. And as I mentioned, there's a lot more to mentorship than just the research. And I think traditionally the research has really been prioritized. Makes sense. That's why we're all coming together here in graduate school or a postdoc position. But there are so many other components that are also really important to have a positive relationship. So I just wanted to give you some awareness of this, to maybe think about maybe what's lacking, what you could use more of, or what's going well, or maybe some other mentors that you might want to seek out for different areas. So I mentioned sort of the psychosocial support, so getting that kind of personal support, folks that are building trust with you, showing empathy, that are concerned about your well-being. Knowledge sharing, which is definitely the research skill building, Cultural awareness, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So being very much inclusive of different backgrounds, different identities, kind of affirming your authentic self and making you feel like you can be authentic in the relationship. And also value sharing. So having some shared values, some shared goals, some shared commitments. This is often tied to the research, I think. So it might be, addressing climate change or curing cancer or helping others in the community. These are things that can definitely enrich the relationship and make it more beneficial as well. So I wanted to share some of the latest research on culturally responsive mentorship. So this is mentorship that does include that line I talked about with the identity and inclusion. So, but also goes so far as to address the power dynamics in mentoring relationships as well as in society, and the oppression and the barriers that can happen in higher education. So sort of the challenges that people might experience and helping them navigate those. And they found that this really increased connection to the field and study of research when folks received this kind of mentorship. They felt more self-efficacy or confidence and were more committed and successful. So again, just wanted to underscore how this is an important part of mentorship that is getting more and more acknowledgement, and there's more and more research about how important it is to talk about identity, to talk about oppression and barriers and challenges and experiences, and not just focus on the research. Just sharing again a little bit of this research, they found that mentees wanted to talk about this, and particularly racial identity was the study, and mentors tended to take a colorblind approach. And while 87.5% of mentees thought cultural diversity should be discussed, only 52% of mentors thought it should be directly discussed. So we see sort of a misalignment as the culture is changing and what the expectations of mentorship are. So again, just to be aware of if this is an area that might be lacking or that you want to seek mentorship on, or seek out additional mentors, but being mindful of all the benefits of getting mentored in this way. And I want to say that we did update the mentoring guidelines. So Graduate Council, which is a faculty governing body, did just update our mentoring guidelines. Kevin's putting these in the chat. I referenced them earlier. This is what defines mentorship for campus, and it has expectations of mentors and mentees in this document. And like I said, they just updated them with a lot more language about expectations around culturally responsive mentorship. And so those are now more up to date and have been communicated to campus. It's really important, I think, to see the way that they've structured this document is that there are mirrored expectations. So there are things expected of mentors and mentees, and a lot of them are the same in terms of sort of respecting those identities and backgrounds, really getting to know each other, making an effort to relationship build, knowing sort of boundaries or priorities outside of the institution, doing some basic education on respect and microaggressions and bias to ensure that we are treating each other with respect. So we're going to talk a little bit about those roles, but please read this document when you have a chance. And like I said, there's about a page of what's expected of the mentees. So a big part of mentoring up is realizing that you do have a role in the relationship. I think often what I've seen from mentees, and it's totally fair, you come to grad school or a new position, you're really looking for your mentor to lead, to tell you those expectations, to mentor you and guide you. And so it's not always clear necessarily what your role would be. And so there are some basic suggestions here on this document of what you'd be expected to do. Again, a very general document because this is for 100 different grad programs across all disciplines. And so it's not super, super detailed or specific to what your mentor's like, but gives you sort of a place to start. And a lot about what you're expected to do is to understand what your goals and needs are and articulate them. And we're going to spend some time talking about that today. So telling your mentors what your mentoring needs are, communicating with them, showing up to meetings or requesting meetings, participating, asking for feedback, really exploring what your goals are, what your research topic will be, what you want to do next. Those are things, again, mentors can't decide for you. So trying to explore those as much as you can, and seeking additional mentors, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then I think it's important to see what you should be receiving from the faculty mentor as well. So you'll see the page of their expectations. So if there's any sort of issues, you can reach out to me or others on this campus to seek mentorship help, but also to be aware of sort of what the expectations and standards are for mentorship across campus. So I wanted to talk about, again, just how important it is to have multiple mentors and not just for research areas. So a lot of what we talked about today is there's a lot more to mentorship than just the knowledge sharing, the research development, which is, of course, important, but also being mindful of sort of that emotional support or personal well-being support, as well as your professional growth support or your career goal support, and thinking kind of people on campus, but also off campus, and sort of diversity in your mentors that you're going to. And this is such a big topic that we are going to have a separate workshop on this, where you'll really map out your network and what mentors you want to seek out and how to do that, and how to write the email if you're going to kind of cold email someone. And that's coming up in May. I think it's May 23rd. So Kevin's going to try and add the registration link. So if you'd like to spend an hour kind of developing your network, please join us then. But just a sneak preview is that typically folks sometimes rely on their mentor to provide all their mentorship. So kind of having this comprehensive mentor, but trying to really change this approach to think about getting more comprehensive mentoring for multiple people. And this is really going to support your success here, your retention, and also your career goals. And in this workshop that we do, we think about, specific priorities you have and goals, or if you're approaching a transition soon, sort of like who can help you through that, and who are the different types of kind of positions or mentors that would be useful for that, and thinking about how you would want to reach out to them. So really encourage you, as you are thinking about mentoring up, is thinking about how you can seek out multiple people in a variety of areas to support your success. So now we're going to transition to mentoring up after that overview of mentoring, and thinking about how you can mentor up. So this is sort of how you can be proactive in your mentoring relationship. What can you do to try and help the relationship be successful? And this is based on managing up principles. So these are things that will help you in any role that you seek out, where there is a boss that you will have. So I'm managing up, my colleagues are managing up all the time. Ways to sort of try and work with a boss or someone that has power over you in a way to have a better working relationship. And this is really acknowledging that you have a lot to contribute, and you have a lot of skills, and you have a lot of ways that you can help the relationship. It's not a passive role where you're not able to participate or to enrich the relationship. So a formal definition is that this is sort of your proactive engagement with the mentor, and acknowledging that both parties are benefiting from the relationship, and thinking about how you can move forward on a goal or a vision together. So one of the first things you can do is to really understand your mentor. So using all of your strengths and skills about learning and researching and kind of solving questions or gathering information, want to use all those skills to better understand your mentor. Because the more you understand them, the better you can work with them or understand their context or their strengths or their kind of motivations. And those are kind of all intel that you can use to try and have a better working relationship. And these are things that you can ask outright if you feel comfortable. So you could sit down and sort of be like, I realize like I want to know a little bit more about what's on your plate, or kind of how you prefer to communicate or work. These are things that you can observe oftentimes. And there are things that you could ask other mentees or others around this mentor or alumni on how to best work with this person. So here are some ideas of things to consider. A lot of things that might be helpful are sort of like, how does your mentor kind of want information? So I've heard of a lot of mentors like don't want long emails because they get so many emails. They want like bullet points. Some mentors I've heard of want Slack updates. So really understanding sort of how do they best want to digest information? Do they like meetings? Do they want you to pop by? And understand that what you prefer might not be what they prefer. What are their priorities? So mentors are juggling a lot. There's a lot of different pressures on them. So understanding what those are, those time constraints, kind of what they're juggling, might give some context to what else is going on with them. Kind of understanding their journey is really helpful in terms of their pathways, where they might have some expertise or experience that you could benefit from, or just better understanding kind of their lens or perspective. Certainly understanding what annoys them is good, so that you can try and avoid that, and try to best work with them. And also some of these larger pictures, like what is their why? Why do they want to be a faculty member? What matters to them? What motivates them? Again, that's trying to get some understanding of those values, and that's a way to really enrich the relationship. And then thinking about sort of where you're different. So where you have strengths that your mentor might not, or skills that you may not. Again, it's reciprocal. So these are opportunities for you to contribute in ways that you may have a different perspective, different experiences, or different skills. And so we talked about how mentors should really take an individualized approach, and that that is expected. I will say that that culture still hasn't completely happened. We're still evolving and working on that. And so you may find that your mentor is just using one style. And this is obviously based on their preferences of sort of where they feel comfortable mentoring, or how they feel most comfortable interacting with mentees. So it's not personal about you. It's very much in line with what their strengths and values are. And so if that is the case, you can decide sort of where you want to adapt and where your boundaries are about, okay, maybe I'm willing to, write emails in bullet point format, even though I would never normally do that, or I will adapt to Slack, even though I don't really like Slack. So finding ways that you're willing to adapt, but also kind of clarifying maybe areas that you don't want to adapt, that you need more, and that then you can meet with someone like me, or thinking about, do I want a different mentor for this? Do I want to give feedback? Sort of what is the best avenue in terms of improving the mentorship you're receiving there. And then really thinking on how to get the most out of your mentor's strengths. So I was just working with a faculty member. I do coaching for faculty and postdocs. And I received a Gallup strengths assessment for a mentor about their top 5 strengths. And I'm going to be doing a coaching session on sort of how that mentor can really use their strengths with their mentees, and what could they offer and ways to help their mentees based on their strengths. So really try to understand this person's great at getting grants, for example. Like, I really want to learn from them about that. They have, this huge success rate with that. So they must have strengths and skills in that area. I could really benefit from that. And then maybe you realize, like, this person isn't always so organized with our meetings. So maybe that's saying, that's an opportunity for me to think about how I could contribute by, maybe I'll make the agendas and I'll kind of set up the times and be responsible for that. And that can really bring value to the relationship. So I want to acknowledge that there's labor and all of that. in terms of how you're going to be contributing and how you're going to be evaluating all of this. But there are ways that you can really actively be involved and contribute to the relationship, as comfortable with sort of your boundaries that you establish. So we're going to do a little activity now. I've talked quite a bit already. So we're going to think about a research or career goal that you want to achieve this academic year. And this year is ending so soon. So if you want to think about by fall quarter, that's fine too. So then list up to three things that you would need from your mentor or your mentors to support this goal. So say you want to pass your QE and you need help practicing, you want feedback on the proposal, and you need another committee member. So you need advice on that or something like that. And then add to the chat if you're comfortable. And we're going to look at sort of what some of these needs are from our mentors. Usually there's some commonalities of things that we really need from our mentors right now. So take a couple minutes to do that. Wonderful, thanks for adding. So let's have a little read of what folks are sharing. So guidance on writing and organization of a paper. So writing support, but feedback as well. Help with getting published. So I see published again here. So a dissertation plan. So that might be sort of a timeline and plan. We have a resource at the end of today's workshop that might help with that. Yeah, and thinking about training for after graduate school. Oh, here we have another timeline for job applications. Submitting manuscripts, so publishing again. And networking goals for conference. Wonderful. So a great opportunity to do some of that mentorship network building that we talked about. Yeah, so I see themes of wanting feedback, but also timeline support. So sort of projecting sort of a plan or steps to the goal. So breaking goals down into smaller steps and kind of calendaring those out. A lot of publishing goals. So again, faculty are usually pretty strong with publications, and so using their strengths to learn from them in that way. Yeah, some guidance on tenured track positions, network building. So yeah, using your mentor's network is a great way to build your own network, and also understanding their career journey or how to navigate a faculty career path. Great options. Okay, well, we're going to give you an opportunity to talk to each other next, since again, I've done a lot of talking. So Kevin's going to put you in breakout rooms just for 10 minutes, and then we're going to talk about some other resources when you get back. But you're going to talk about what can you do as a proactive mentee to communicate what you need from the goals that you just came up with. So Kevin's going to put this question in the chat so you have it with you in your breakout rooms. We talked about sort of what the mentees can do to proactively manage their relationships. So you're going to go into rooms now for about 10 minutes. We wanted to share just a little bit of overview of what we talked about and give you another resource. So we talked about understanding your mentees or your mentor's style, figuring out when you can adapt, clarifying what you're seeking from mentors. So you did an exercise, a little bit of that about thinking what you need, what your goals are, and what mentorship you need to achieve those. And then we're going to talk about taking initiative to have a conversation. So Kevin's going to put a handout in the chat. It's actually from our communication session, but I think it's useful for today's workshop as well, of just some examples of how you can phrase things or articulate what some of your needs are. And so how you could sort of explain that you need help with the timeline, or you'd want more feedback on your writing, for example. And so that's a handout that Kevin will put in the chat. A lot of people find it really useful to just see some of those examples of how to phrase these things when you're asking for support. I know that can be kind of difficult to do. And so hopefully this is a helpful resource in terms of how you could phrase things or bring it up in a conversation. I'm also happy to chat with you about how you can have those conversations, as well as sort of coordinators or other advisors can help you to think about, approaching that if that feels extra uncomfortable. But hopefully that's helpful. So again, Kevin's going to put that handout in the chat. And then another thing is asking for that feedback, initiating meetings, asking for advice, really figuring out what your goals are, sharing your goals with your mentor so that they can be more helpful in terms of helping you achieve those. And then taking advantage of different mentee resources. So like I said, we have this Mentoring Up program. We have 2 other workshops happening this month. So we have Building a Mentorship Network workshop where you will spend an hour developing your network. We also have the communication session coming up in May as well. So if you want to spend more time thinking about how to better communicate with your mentor, we'll be spending that entire workshop going into depth there. And like I said, I'm available as a resource. There's a lot of tools on our website as well in terms of aligning expectations. So there are things at your disposal that you can take advantage of to help your relationship. So today we're going to just end with thinking about a relationship goal. So we just talked about your research or career goals and what you're thinking about for the next year. But now I wanted you to think about your primary mentoring relationship and just think about a goal you might have for that. So how do you want to collaborate? Is there an area for improvement that you'd like to address? Do you really want to get, some expertise or development out of this person? And thinking about how this relationship is really going to help you long term. So think about that a little bit. What do you want out of this relationship for the next year? What's a main goal that you have, or something that needs to be addressed, or that you'd like to receive from this person? And we're going to set a goal. And I know you all had great goals as well for your academics and research. So the SMART goal model will be helpful for you there too. So we're going to talk about developing SMART goals today for the relationship, but you can use this framework for any goal so that you really set yourself up for success for achieving your goal. And so SMART goals, if you're not familiar, they are an acronym. We love an acronym on this campus. And Kevin's just put in the SMART goals worksheet for you in the chat. So you have a copy of this to take with you. You can use this again for all of your goals, but it really asks you to state the goal really concretely and break it down into smaller steps. That's really going to be helpful to being successful is if you don't have this huge, large goal that's really hard to achieve, like write a dissertation. Like that is like massive. So trying to break it down into smaller steps is really helpful. How you're going to measure those steps and whether you're going to achieve it or not, making sure that it is achievable. So do you have everything you need to achieve those? Do you need help from other people? Do you need to learn a skill? Do you need mentorship in a particular area? Aligning this with your long-term goals and your priorities is really helpful for motivation. So seeing how some small step is going to tie to sort of your dream job is really useful into sort of motivating you through kind of a long journey of achieving a goal. And then we talked about timelines earlier. So deadlines, like deadlines per small step. And maybe getting some feedback. Is this realistic? So sometimes mentees really take on a lot. They're like, I'm going to write my dissertation in a quarter or something like that. And so getting some feedback of like, does this seem reasonable? Set yourself up for success, time it strategically. And so I really want to task you with filling out a goal for your relationship, thinking about something you would want to work on or develop or improve or enrich over the next year with that primary mentor. And that worksheet in the chat is a great way to start. I think they have an example in the handout of what that could look like, what a goal could look like for the relationship. And so I'm going to give you some minutes to look that over. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat before we do resources and wrap up as well. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at that. Put any questions you have in the chat, and then we will go over resources and wrap up. All right. If you have the rest of the time to work on that, feel free to keep going and spend time on that worksheet. Just want to share that these slides and the recording will be shared. We do have a link to the Grad Council and Mentoring Guidelines, so look those over so you understand sort of what the expectations around mentorship are, but as well as your role and your mentor's role. And then there's some additional resources here on sort of understanding the change in mentorship, rethinking mentoring, the research around mentorship, particularly with science of effective mentoring in STEM, mentoring up resource on what you can do as a mentee. So that's a book if you're interested in reading more. as well as getting mentored in graduate school. And then we have a link to our mentee resources on our graduate studies website. So these are different tools and handouts that might be useful to you as mentees. There's also a mentor toolkit. So if you are interested in learning more about tools that you can use as mentors, or just seeing what mentors can use, you can check that out as well. Any questions before we wrap up? Let me know. Feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, the remaining time is for you to work on that worksheet or enjoy the rest of your lunch hour. Thank you for joining us.